Hello, everybody, and welcome to an on-night New York City AR on location. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you are all seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, getting vaccines and starting to get back to normal. On-night is a monthly meetup organized by augmentedreality.org, a nonprofit with a mission to advance AR in order to advance humanity. And we do it by bringing the best of AR with the best of the AR community, and that's you guys, so thanks for joining. We started it in 2009, and this will be, guess what number? 120 meetup it will be holding. So thank you all for supporting us all these years. AR has entered the mainstream. I think we agree with that, mostly with face augmentations, online shopping, and games. But where it truly shines is when it's on location. So we have assembled a fantastic lineup with some of the key players vying to lead AR on location. It's going to be an awesome meetup, so you're in for a treat. By joining On-Night, you join a global network of AR professionals that meet in over 20 cities around the world. Currently, most of them are online, so check some of the other cities that we have here. You can find it on this link. And since you're now part of this incredible community, let's get social. Our hashtag for today is On-Night NYC, and let's see if we can get it to trend today. You may also follow us on Twitter for the latest news in AR and VR, and definitely check out our YouTube channel with the largest collection of videos about AR and VR, over 2,000 videos since 2010, including meetups like these, which are being recorded and shared globally. And if you want a weekly digest of the latest in AR and VR every Friday in your inbox, sign up for our weekly spatial newsletter. You just go to our website and it will pop up and you can sign up for it there. We're all missing the good old days where we could meet in person, so we vow to have a big comeback for AWUSA this November in Santa Clara, California. And I really can't wait to see you all, not as holograms, but as humans in the same room. Submissions are open for speakers, for exhibitors. You can nominate your products for the Augie Awards. There's a lot that you can already start planning for, although it's some months away. And I don't know if you knew, but AW also offers now classes and workshops for XR professionals. So here are 4 of the upcoming workshops. If it's something of interest, check it out on the website and sign up. Awesome. So now we're ready to get started. Let me ask you all, what's most important about AR?
Location.
Location.
Location. It
Got it,
is.
guys. No need to further discuss this. All right, so here are our amazing speakers for today. You'll hear from 2 of the giants that are investing a lot in AR on location, Google and Niantic, and also from a young startup that wants to offer additional value on top of what some of the big platforms are offering. And after each talk, we'll have time for questions, so please post them in the chat or just jump onto the video and let us know what your question is. But to kick it off with what's happening on the battlefield of location AR, give it up for our favorite XR analyst to give us kind of the lay of the land. So put your hands together for the founder of Artillery Intelligence and AR Insider, Mike Boland. Mike?
Thanks, Ori. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So let me share my screen here and then I'll kick off. Great. So thank you, Ori, and hi, everyone. It's great to be here at On-Night New York, but from San Francisco. I spend a lot of time as one of sort of the co-hosts of On-Night SF, so it's great to be here at sort of the sister chapter in New York. So anyway, getting right into it, I hope to sort of, as Ori mentioned, sort of set the stage for our great speakers today and then sort of get out of the way. And to really do that, one of the things that we've been covering at AR Insider is a sort of new series called The Location Wars. And actually, excuse me for a second. I need to... Yeah, sorry. Location Wars. And one of the things that really sort of drew me to this topic is my analyst background. So for about 10 years before covering XR, I don't often talk about this, but my sort of beat as an analyst was mobile advertising and media with an emphasis on location-based technologies. So that was my beat for a number of years, covering companies like Foursquare and Yelp, and Google's work in local search and SEO. And one of the lessons from that period that's always sort of stuck with me is that location targeting in sort of content and advertising tends to perform better than non-location targeting equivalents, based on that really sort of that geographically anchored relevance. Now, if that sounds familiar, that's because it's also the story behind the AR cloud, which we often, spend a lot of time talking about, in having data that's anchored to the physical places around us that can really enable and unlock geospatial AR experiences. So in that sense, AR and this already sort of existing world of geolocation are sort of colliding. And a lot of the leaders of that existing local search and local commerce industry are leaning into AR to future-proof their existing businesses. So to illustrate that, we'll go through 3 quick examples. There are several companies working on this, but just sort of 3 representative examples. And the most prominent of which is Google. And you're going to be hearing directly from Justin after me, so that's probably more valuable. But, from the perspective of sort of a third-party observer, and again, with that sort of background in looking at local commerce, Google Maps has become the go-to place to find things locally. And that's actually been quite lucrative for Google. They actually make more money on a CPC basis for local searches versus non-local searches because of greater consumer intent to purchase things when they're looking for something nearby. It's sort of a more immediate and warmer lead for local businesses. So that sort of key lesson, I think, sits alongside many of Google's AR efforts. So this is what we like to call the Internet of Places. So just like Google started to create tremendous value indexing the web, 20 plus years ago, it wants to index the physical world and be the knowledge layer for the spatial web. And it's already gotten started in building that index if you consider tools like Google Lens, which taps into Google's years of experience in indexing and identifying images. That now becomes a strong training set for object recognition in the real world. And then similarly, as you'll probably hear from Justin, Live View is a really cool tool because it taps into Street View imagery as a object recognition database to, identify streets and storefronts and to localize devices before performing AR. And the result is that you can, point your phone at a storefront to get informational overlays like star ratings and hours of operation, And one thing here that I want to underscore is this goes back to that point I mentioned earlier, where that local commercial intent on the part of the user is strong. So as I mentioned, it's higher for searches that have local intent. And that now is amplified because not only are users nearby and looking to transact, but they're literally in view of a given storefront. So this could really be a strong monetization play for Google eventually. That's sort of my speculation once it gets the traction to a certain level. And the next step beyond that is going inside the business and helping you, once you're there, to be better informed about things like menu items or in-aisle interactions for products in retail settings. And again, Google's really primed for this because of its existing assets and data. I mentioned Google Images and Street View for those other examples. In this case, it's tapping into Google My Business, which is its local business database and information hub that sort of sits behind Google Maps and local search. So continue to watch what Google is doing there. And again, the key point is the positioning from existing sort of data in being the world's search engine for the last 20 plus years really primes it for a lot of these things. So the second one is Apple. And Apple has already felt this sort of black eye from the Mapgate mishap you may remember from about 10 years ago when Apple Maps first came out. And it was just totally dysfunctional. It was like the Siri of mapping. And it's since really improved through lots of third-party data integrations, but it's always sort of wanted to redeem itself. And recently it's been completely rebuilding Apple Maps from the ground up. But while it's out there sort of getting that first-party mapping data and, getting Street View-like data with these these vans that kind of drive around with cameras on the top. While it's doing that, it's capturing 3D spatial maps. So this is a means we believe that could be the basis for Apple's sort of own AR cloud that it's quietly developing. And then if you pan back, there are several other Apple initiatives that have these sort of geo-local components. So the most prevalent is Geo Anchors, which is its capability in ARKit for developers to build apps that contain geo-anchored AR content that's persistent and multi-user. Its Project Gobi is also something notable, where it's sort of planting physical markers in retail partner locations like Starbucks. And many of us have speculated that this is sort of laying the tracks for some AR glasses experiences to interact with or pay for things at the retail point of sale in these very geo-relevant ways. And then there's App Clips, which is a non-AR phenomenon, but they have some AR implications, I believe, for these sort of quick and dynamic interactions that don't require downloading a full-blown app, such as paying a parking meter. And these are the sort of things, this really dynamic use case that aligns with, what AR is going to need to be in order to sort of operate in quick and dynamic ways. So really all of this, all of the above is sort of kind of building towards and laying the tracks for Apple's rumored AR glasses so that there are experiences in place so they sort of hit the ground running. And a lot of those are going to be geo-oriented and bring in some of that geo-relevance just for more sort of contextual value. And then the last one I'll go over quickly because I'm running out of time here is Facebook. And of course, there are several other companies working on this. This is just 3 examples. And it isn't as sort of tied to local commerce as Google is, for example, but it's chasing a few sort of geo-local AR ambitions that are notable. And these will be more about interacting with people and places in the real world to deepen those connections, which you might expect from Facebook. And its sort of moonshot towards doing that is its Live Maps program. And this is sort of its version of an AR cloud. Well, this is one of the themes you may be detecting here. Each of these tech players are sort of planting seeds for their own sort of version of a proprietary AR cloud. And Facebook's advantage in doing so is its sheer scale. So it can sort of crowdsource spatial mapping by ingesting data as its users move through the world. It can sort of build these geometric and ontological data sets. And the way it's doing that is through sort of the layered approach. So it's looking at this in a few ways. It wants to build a location layer, so that's where a given building is, and then the index layer, which is the geometry of different spaces, and then the content layer, which sort of sits on top of all of them, which is the more sort of private and permission stuff that you'll add, such as the whereabouts of your permissions or your possessions, that you want to interact with in AR. And one thing that's probably screaming out from all of this is that it's a privacy minefield. So the question for Facebook isn't just, can they do this technologically, but will people opt in and trust Facebook with like the layout of your bedroom, for example? So that's going to be the wild card here. So I'll actually put a pause there. Again, I just gave those 3 examples, but there are several more. We're doing articles on each of these players in our Location Wars series on AR Insider. You'll get to hear from Meghan directly about what Niantic is doing here. But I'll pause there in the interest of time, and I guess kick it back to you, Ori.
All right. Thank you, Mike. That was a great kickoff. And let's see if you have any questions for Mike.
Yeah, Mike, so who do you think will end up owning the AR cloud, or do you think it's going to become a question of something where it's super fragmented? All these different tech giants have their own AR clouds. Because my question is really around how each of these AR clouds would be able to speak to each other as well. Is this something where we have a crowdsourced map and only people in the US can use, let's say, Apple Maps, or only people in Europe can use some of the parts of the AR cloud? I mean, how would it all come together? Surely there must be some sort of consensus happening.
Yeah, this is a huge topic, and one that's close to Ori's heart, I know, with sort of open AR cloud and how are these things be interoperable. And this could be a debate that we have for a long time, but just really quickly, one way I look at this is the precedent of the web. The way that we have the web now, in just broad conceptual terms, it's something that allows for proprietary networks, it allows for proprietary products, but it's interoperable. The web has common standards, it has protocols such as HTTPS, it has common languages such as HTML, and the ability to be interoperable. I think there's no way of avoiding the fragmentation that's going to sort of be a pain in the butt, but also a necessary evil, as companies really need that self-motivation motivation to go build these proprietary networks. All those things I just mentioned, they deserve in some ways to have some degree of, you know, proprietary monetization to their sort of the flag they're planting with their proprietary AR cloud. But I think that as long as it's interoperable, I think that's the key word. We can avoid some of those headaches.
All right, thank you, Mike. We'll move on and maybe come back if there are more kind of general questions about the market. And next, we have one of the big players, some would say the biggest, in location AR. The Google Maps Live View is really groundbreaking in how massive it is, kind of the breadth and the coverage of the world with AR on location. So far, you know, it's been used mostly for navigation. And recently, they added the indoor capabilities, which is poised to be a game changer, I think, for retailers, venues, airports, malls. So let's hear it from the senior manager of Google Apps Live View, Justin Quimby. Give it up.
Thanks, everybody. All right, so to get started, my name is Justin Quimby. I'm a senior product manager at Google. I've been working on Live View for a few years now. Prior to that, I worked on Project Tango, which some of you may remember. And over the last couple of years, our team's been working hard to bring augmented reality to one of Google's more beloved products, Google Maps. And so I wanted to give you kind of an overview of what we've been working on over the last few years, and then talk about where we're going a bit in the future. So back in, goodness, this seems so long ago, we introduced our approach to global localization via a blog post, where we're talking about, well, how can we introduce localization at a global scale? And as Ori and other people. Looks like Element. Okay, I'm back. All right. So we introduced talking about large scale globalization using Street View. And one of the challenges when we talk about AR for a company of Google's size is the question of, you know, sometimes it can be a hammer without a nail, and that's potentially a valid point. And for us, we saw an opportunity within Maps to address one of our longstanding user problems, where in people who are walking around, remember travel, remember going to places where you didn't know exactly where you were going? Well, one of the challenges, you don't know immediately where you are when you come out of that subway station, when you come out of that building, when you come out of that airport. And part of the reason for that is that the compass and GPS don't cut it in urban environments, which can sometimes lead to results like this. Now, there have been huge strides made in the last few years with regard to getting improving GPS positioning and magnetometer readings, et cetera. But the fundamental problem in urban canyons is that your GPS signal is getting bounced multiple times off of the buildings. And this is causing the timing, the very precise timing for this timing between your phone and the GPS satellite to be thrown off. And that's why your blue dot wanders. And this is on top of all of the electromagnetic field interference in these urban environments that confuses the very, very small compass inside your phone. So, so how do we approach this and solve this? So this is where what we do is we take, use the visual features from the camera, and then figuring out how to track that motion and compare it to a known good pose. Now, this sort of visual-based motion tracking has been around since the days of the Apollo program. The challenge has always been, though, how do you deliver it at scale? And that's where we introduce this idea of global localization. And what powers globalization is a combination of our visual positioning service, or VPS, combined with AR Core, combined with all of our Street View data, and machine learning sprinkled on top. Well, no, it's not sprinkled on top. It's actually critical to then, at scale, extract visual points from all of our Street View imagery, which then allows us to precisely position users' phones, which then lets us give them information about their journey, so walking navigation. And this has been a multi-year journey. We've been working on this for over 3 years. And part of this is a lot of prototyping and a very measured approach to rolling this out. We started out with team fooding, and internal to Google Dog Food. Then we used the Google Local Guides program for Maps to preview this. And we also did a pixel preview to test this out, because we wanted to introduce this to people very, very gradually. And one of the things here is that we've done a lot of prototypes, and we've done a lot of explorations, and we've thrown out a lot of stuff. I'm particularly a fan of the pizza slice as to help show you your way. But so part of this is that as we have been building out Live View to help people inside of Google Maps, we've been learning what works and what hasn't at global scale. And speaking of global scale, when you pull out your phone, the expectation is that Google Maps should just work. It shouldn't work just in specific locations. And as a result, we've been working to make sure that where we have Street View imagery, Live View works. There's over 80 countries and counting. And that coverage of Street View powers this localization. And we've made a huge amount of progress in terms of processing that imagery. So we've gone from 25 days to process all of our Street View imagery globally to less than 6. Our machine learning models have been improving our pipeline. So we evaluate tens of millions of images daily for training and evaluation of our ML models. And we've also done a bunch of work on improving performance and latency. So over 11% reduction in latency, 2.5x faster cold cache queries, 3x faster warm cache. Like, we've done a lot of work to make sure that this works well at scale. And then we get into expansions. So we started out with AR walking navigation outside, and then we expanded to be able to help calibrate your blue dot so your blue dot is more accurate. We introduced the ability to share your location with friends and see them inside of Live View. And then what we've referred to as Lighthouse, or being able to see a given dropped pin on the map using Live View. And recently we announced and have been talking about indoor Live View. And it's currently live on both Android and iOS in select malls inside the US. And it'll start rolling out in the coming months on both Android and iOS in select train station malls and airports in Tokyo and Zurich. We're taking the same measured approach to rolling out these capabilities for indoor capabilities as we did to outdoor walking navigation. And we are not done by any stretch of the imagination. We have been building a number of efforts around capabilities to expand and extend the geospatial content that is shown inside of Live View, as well as incorporating it into more user journeys within Google Maps. And we use a number of techniques to help expand and extend the capabilities we're working on. One of the things we do is use model apps to prototype out mechanics to see if they work well or not. And we also have a wide variety of user research apps we use to test the efficacy of Live View in terms of how people mentally model spaces. Because most people, in a shocking turn of events, most people don't have a cartographic 2D map in their head when they think about space. They think about it in a much more egocentric perspective of, I'm in this area and I relate to certain things. And so we've had to build applications that let us then test our assumptions about how people visualize and internalize their own position so that we can have Live View help them. And these are just, I mean, we've been working on this for over 3 years, but these are just first steps in a very, very long journey. Google sees huge value in helping people be able to navigate, explore, and get things done in the world. And we're committed to continuing that journey forward. So that's my presentation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Justin. That was fantastic as an intro. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions. I'm going to start with one. I started using or testing it over 18 months ago. And, while I've been traveling, I tried it across 3 or 4 continents, and it always worked. And I was blown away by that. You mentioned that currently you have coverage for 80 countries around the world.
I believe so, yeah.
Each one of these countries, what's kind of more or less the percentage of coverage of places?
It depends on what we talk about when we have where our Street View coverage is. So if there was a country, for example, that only had one street with Google Street View coverage in it, then that one street would work really well with with Live View, but not so much elsewhere in the country. And so I don't have off the top of my head what percentage in terms of square kilometers or square miles per country we have coverage in. But one way to think about it is that Google's investment, 15+ year investment in Street View, has been about collecting imagery where people are. And that's primarily in the urban centers and making sure urban centers are mapped out, and then the subsequent areas around them. And so over time, what we've done is we've expanded our coverage to different countries, and we've then also made our coverage better. And that's where we drive additional streets, additional areas. And one of the interesting things is when we talk about indoor live view, obviously we can't drive a car through an airport, mall, or train station. But what we do is we have what we refer to as our Herschel Trekker backpacks. And these are backpacks which basically have the camera system and all of the sensors that go on a Google Street View car, and it's just in a backpack. And so those backpacks are what we walk those venues with to provide the imagery, which then powers live view and localization and the geo-positioning of data.
Very cool, thank you. So let's start getting some questions. So Sam, I'm getting to you in a second. Cecilia, the organizer of On Nite Florence, actually shared a video where she kind of is walking around, kind of pointing to monuments, and she experienced that there was a lack of information about some of the monuments, and especially, when you kind of walk not from the street itself, but from kind of where people walk, but not necessarily cars, it wasn't as good as other places. So I guess the question is there anything that can be done on that, and what's kind of the progress of providing more information about monuments and things like that you see in cities?
Yeah, so what I would say is, well, the first thing is we should connect offline, because I'd love to hear your experience in Florence, because it's a beautiful city, and getting feedback from users outside of the United States is always important. So I'm based in Oakland, California, and we have a lot of folks based in Mountain View. And so getting feedback from folks internationally is really important. So I'd love to connect with you offline on that. But in terms of your other specific question, this kind of falls back to that question of where do we have Street View imagery? So the urban cores of Europe are incredibly dense. There's some regions which, there are areas which have no driving capabilities at all. And so therefore, we need to send in some of these backpacks to go and map those spaces. However, the twisty, turny streets of some of those areas, we may not have done every street, but I would love to get specifics on, because if we do have Street View imagery in a place where it didn't work for you, that's actually a good data point. So if you haven't already filed a bug in the app, then we should connect offline. And to the question of information about monuments, this is where we get to the question of geospatial data. Over time, so today, when you drop a pin on the base map, the 2D map, and then you can turn on live view and see where that pin is relative to you. And so this is the beginning steps. Again, we're in early stages, even though it's been 3 years, of bringing geospatial data from Google Maps as a whole into the live view experience. If you've used Street View recently, in certain areas, we show annotations in Street View for various businesses as well as some monuments. And so more and more, we're going to be bringing geospatial data from Google Maps into these imagery first experiences. So, but if there's a specific monument that you're like, why in the heck is this thing not in this? Also, we should talk about that.
Florence, it's all over the place. So
yeah, the list is like every single house has probably had 15 important historical occurrences within it.
Please. So. All right, Sam has a question. You want to jump on video and ask it?
It's just loud here. Hi, I'm where?
No worries.
Here I am. Hi. What, I don't even remember what my
indoor navigation.
I don't even remember. What's needed to create internal navigation, and does like 5G make a difference? Because I love internal navigation. I think it's amazing, but it's hard to like suggest it to somebody as like, you should do this if you don't know what's involved to be able to do it, and if there's any kind of hardware or anything that people need once 5G is released.
Right. Yeah. So the answer is that 5G is not required to enable for live view at all. Part of Google Maps requirement is we want to work on as many people's devices in as many places as possible. And so that's where we get into the interesting question of like 5G with increased data speeds. It provides more accuracy in terms of we can send additional imagery potentially, but 5G is not required, but 5G often has better network connectivity on a regular basis, and so that means you're not having to worry about drop packets, all that kind of good stuff. In terms of the question of indoor live view and what's necessary. So today, the way in which we map these spaces is using, as I mentioned, those backpacks to go through where Google operators will go through and map those spaces. And then we use some of the same techniques we use for creating walking paths outdoors as we do indoors. And so part of what we've had to do is work to make sure that those techniques apply to those indoor spaces and work well, and also work well. The other major challenge for indoor venues is multi-levels. So for example, in airports and subway stations, like Tokyo, for example, Tokyo has a lot of very vertical, very complicated train stations. And so making sure our systems are able to handle walking paths and handle those kind of navigation paths. And it's an intuitive way to the user to convey to the user what's the next step, what's the next step in their journey. So we put a lot of effort into that, and more will be coming soon. And so today I would say Google needs to we work with these venue owners to map the facilities, and then we take them through our pipelines to be able to provide navigation information.
Do you think it's going to be something that would change? I mean, that seems very intensive to try to do that for like every building and every whatever. Sorry, it's loud in here. Do you think that there's going to be an opportunity to create something that's smaller, where it like some kind of beacon or some kind of thing that would allow it to be easier eventually?
I mean, in the future, there's all sorts of possibilities in the future. One of the interesting things, and this is where some of the other speakers will, I think, touch on this, is part of what Google does is Google approaches things at massive scale. So if Google is going to apply something and say, hey, we want this to work, and it needs to work in all the major venues, for example, in a city. We don't want to have high levels of coverage. And so that's approaching the problem from one direction. There are also folks who are approaching it from the other direction of saying, hey, we have a specific venue or a specific place. We really want to deliver an amazing location-based experience there. And that because it's one location, allows for a different approach and a different set of tools, et cetera. But yeah, also, I mean, again, it's still early days. You can expect more from us over the coming years on this front.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. So now Jan-Erik has been very patient. It's 1:30 a.m. where he is at, and he has a question for you. You want to jump on video, Jan-Erik, or you want me to read it?
Sure. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Looks okay. So this is sort of a question both for Justin Quimby and for Niantic. The first part is for Justin, and that's if this Earth Cloud Anchors is technology that drives this in Google Maps. It's in early access. Are there any plans to make it available for third parties, like my startup? If I want to visualize a building on the site, I'd love to use your technology. When could I expect to do that?
That's a great question, and I don't have anything to publicly announce about that at this point in time.
Okay, understood. So the next one is general for Niantic and you, and that is GeoPost. Have you looked at the draft specification from the Open Geospatial Consortium? There's a link here in the chat. You can go and see. Are you considering to implement support for the OGC GeoPost standard?
Well, at least, so I have not spoken with my team about that specific standard. Google Maps has a fairly extensive set of data that we ingest, and then also all of our historic information. So we've not made any public statements about adapting or adopting that standard. One of the challenges for Google is we have a huge amount of historical information and data, and so any sort of changes to standards requires like backfilling all of that data. So I don't believe we have any public statements around that public standard. I'll hand it over to Niantic.
I think we're in the same boat. We don't have any public statement around that, but I will look at the link and bring that information to our team as we build out our maps as well. So thank you for flagging. And then to your earlier question, we are, if you do have to jump since it's 1 a.m. for you, we are in alpha right now. So I'll talk to that where developers can sign up to get access to our technology and alpha, and then we'll be moving to beta next month. So do check it out on niantic.dev.
Actually, we support it generic. And yeah, we're also a part of the Open OER Cloud initiative to develop these standards around building a more open AR cloud.
Thanks very much, Justin. All right, folks, now we're switching gears, and I'd like you to meet a young startup that is tackling this massive problem of indoor navigation and 3D mapping of indoor spaces. We have a lot of questions. How does it work? What use cases are they seeing traction with? How will they compete with Google and other giants? So to answer these questions and many others, give it up for the CEO and founder of ARway, all the way from the UK. Give it up for Baran Korkmaz.
Thank you for having me on board, Ori, and yeah, pleasure to be here. And also, big fan of Google's work. I actually started building my first AR apps when I was 14, back in 2017 when ARKit and ARCo came out. So I'm like, a big fan here. But yeah, just to kind of give a little backstory into where we're at and what we're doing here at ARway. So with what Justin said about all the localization stuff and awesome tech that they're working on, we're right now offering that to developers, but we have a little different mapping technique. So I'll just get into the slides. I just want to check, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Wait, sorry, just open up the site. Okay. Okay, cool. So just to get into it, yeah, on the product end, what we're really focused on is offering a tool to developers, and the focus where we have, of course, is offering something on mobile right now, where mobile AR is supported, and there's over 3 billion devices. So essentially, it's offering the ARway kit, which is a package comprised of 3 tools. One, to map your environment, so indoor or outdoors. Secondly, we have a web editor and a CMS to essentially, of course, you can integrate this with Unity, but to build all your experiences on the web and essentially, yeah, have the experience directly integrated within your app. I think, okay, cool. And so behind the actual technology, there's 3 different components that we're really working on. So the first one is a real-time cloud-based mapping solution. So similar to what Niantic and Google and all the other solution providers are proposing, we're working on a similar technology of being able to capture your physical environment into these feature points. And then secondly, on the web editor, we have a no-code content platform. So essentially giving developers and being able to cut through the bottleneck issues of having to rebuild applications in in Unity, instead of having to go through that whole process. We offer that content platform, so you can essentially update the content once and have it dynamically persist. And then yeah, for the actual localization, we offer our own cloud service where we essentially allow developers to achieve the same kind of localization that Google has. Of course, Google's mapping technique is completely separate. We're giving developers the tools they need to create the maps themselves, own the maps that they actually create, and edit them as much as they like. So just to get into really where our focus is, we believe that developers will be the ones who unlock all these consumer and business applications for AR. And that's why we're kind of starting from the ground up. I mean, just from my own personal experience of trying to build on top of ARKit and ARCore, I very quickly realized, like, actually, if I wanted to create some sort of meaningful AR experience, Unity AR Foundation just wouldn't be enough. And so that's why, with that frustration and with the frustration of using some of the other toolkits that were in the market back in 2018 and 19, and of course, after 60 was acquired by Niantic, I decided that actually, building our own tools to not only give developers the power they need to map their environments, but also to make something that's open and AR clouds that are actually owned by developers. So just to get into the whole process of like how that works in action, I know that Justin might have already shown how localization and mapping might work, but this is how it works in our sort of mobile UI. So this is the Westfield shopping mall here in London, the large shopping center in Europe. And in under 2 minutes, we're able to essentially create a map of the main hall for the shopping mall. And so we will actually invited by their team to just show them the technology and give them a test run on how easy it is to deploy AR experiences, because of course retail and all sorts of other industries are still oblivious to the power of AR. So if I skip to the next slide, and then once we of course capture the environment, this is how it would then look on the web editor. So it looks a little crazy with the point cloud. So as you can see, that there's 2 point clouds there. There's a green and a purple. So those are 2 different maps that are created and that we've been able to essentially merge together. And for a web editor, we're able to then anchor and make it easy for developers to anchor their experiences. So in this case, there's a spaceship, on overlaying, and there's a pathway as well. I'm not sure if you can see, and then there's like a little AR billboard thing. But let's see in action. Let's see how it actually looks. So what's happening here is we localize, press the button, a couple seconds, bang, you see your AR content. Turn around, gets another anchor, and you're able to see that spaceship in that space. And then here comes the navigation part. Again, we haven't made a sexy UI like Google has, of course, but we're still able to get some pathways down and place the AR navigation content. And really our plan was to make something scalable and something for developers so that anyone can recreate this kind of experience anywhere. So that's how it looks on the AR front. Right now, we're working with 100+ different studios to essentially bring these kind of experiences to big brands in travel, marketing, and enterprise. And we really do believe that it will be these small developer studios or some of the larger ones who will end up creating and realizing AR's potential. And we believe that by giving them the tools they need to create the maps and own them by themselves, that's how we'll be unlocking it. So right now we have coverage in around 50 countries where our mapping has been used and maps have been created. And just an example of some of the stuff we've been able to create. So we had this use case with Spectre, which is, well, actually, let me explain a little bit more on that. So Spectre is a mixed reality platform. It was our first enterprise AR use case on the HoloLens. And this was from our recent partnership with Microsoft. So we ended up actually integrating with Spatial Anchors to offer a more robust localization system. So what we realized and what we plan to do as well is to do this with other mapping services such as Google as well, where we're able to combine different mapping solutions and essentially create something that's more robust by running the algorithm simultaneously, and by rendering a couple different point clouds, we're able to then achieve this kind of hyper accuracy. And in this use case, we needed to actually figure out a way where we could also experiment with 5G a little. And again, there's going to be some more information, a blog coming on this exact work we've been doing with Spiral Technologies. But they have an amazing enterprise use case and a potential $1 billion opportunity for AR within that sector of using it for manufacturing and overlaying content, as you can see on the image on the right. But yeah, that's some of the use cases and cool stuff that we've been working on, and of course the developers we've supported. We also have some way more awesome stuff to show, but I don't have enough time here. But I do want to get to the question of for developers, and as a developer myself, who is going to own the AR cloud, and really where is it all going? And we believe at Ori that it's going to be the developers and users who end up deciding that, and it will be especially up to the developers to create the apps that the users will want. And so our belief is that the next steps for this to happen will be to actually adopt and create a universal positioning system. So of course, Google will have their own solution and Niantic will have their own. But we believe that if we're able to create some sort of consensus around these different 3D mapping systems, then that will be the ultimate way to connect the different AR clouds together. And one of the more interesting experiments we've been testing is, can we represent some of these spatial maps as NFT? So the map you guys just saw of Westfield, we've actually listed, well, it's not on sale for now, but we've actually minted it as an NFT. And the crazy idea here is, okay, who's going to own the maps for the AR cloud. And we believe that developers deserve to own the maps themselves instead of having it tied to a single closed-ended system or platform. And so that's why using NFTs as a way to represent ownership is I believe one step closer to the vision of creating that open AR cloud. So yeah, that's what we've been up to at Ori, and what we plan on doing next is, of course, exploring the universal positioning system and starting to implement some of these consensus protocols. And we'll have some more blogs and announcements coming out on what we plan to exactly execute on. But we're excited to bring this to our community of already over 2,000 plus developers.
Thank you, Baran. Congrats, my man. What amazing progress. That's incredible. I have one question for you. How old are you?
Yeah, I'm 18 currently.
My gosh, it's crazy.
Yeah, but it's a team effort, so yeah.
I was going to ask, kind of the key question that a lot of people have, I mean, right now you're kind of ahead of what the others are offering. If you want to build an indoor navigation or indoor experience, work with Airway. They have the SDK now. You have the tool. You can do the mapping with your phone. You don't need a backpack. It's pretty cool. But what happens in a couple of years when the big players kind of catch up with probably more scalable, more robust systems? What do you do then?
Yeah, and I was hoping you'd ask that, Ori, because actually what we believe is, right now, and I think we can all agree, AR isn't at its fully actualized form, right? Like looking at it through a mobile phone, right? It's just like looking at it through a window. So, I think right now the mobile scale of AR is the fact that we can capture, the AR cloud infrastructure that we need today to start building for the future. And that's when AR glasses and Apple has the whole halo effect and when that starts coming into play. And so I think to answer your question around whether we plan to build a better mapping system than Google, or to build a more robust localization system than all the other big tech giants, that's not our mission. Our plan is to actually build around those systems. We want to start to create some interoperability. And one thing that's interesting is how these different spatial coordinate systems will relate to each other. So right now, if I was to create a map in Google, I wouldn't be able to relocalize using Spatial Anchors or using another mapping service. However, there is a solution around being able to create a map within, and this might also answer Mike's whole question around how the AR clouds will talk to each other, but it is currently impossible to relocalize using another mapping system. So one thing you can actually do, and something we're experimenting on, is basically being able to relate different spatial coordinate systems together. So if I were to create a map using Google's system, could I then end up using Microsoft's spatial anchors to relocalize within that same map? And so I think by achieving that interoperability, that's the key term there, the interoperability. I think that's when we'll be able to give developers the options to build on all these different platforms, right? So if Niantic ends up in a couple of years becoming the leader of AR and builds, I don't know, something bigger than everyone else, then sure, we'll give developers what they need to build on those platforms. And I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of different hardware devices that also end up coming out. So we want to give developers that single top layer toolkit that they need to deploy these experiences and make it as easy as possible, and also unlock the business cases here. So we need to work together as a community to do that. It's not just a single effort. You can't just give developers cool tech and then expect them to build it all. And that's why mobile AR hasn't really taken off as much as it should, because developers don't want to just be tied to a single system. They want to have that openness to it. And yeah, we believe we're going to become the toolkit to do that. And the toolkit is the first part. That's only step one of the vision.
Awesome, Baran. Fantastic answer. There's some more questions for you. You can just go ahead and answer in the chat. We need to move on to Niantic, our fourth speaker today. Everybody knows Pokemon Go. It's been this amazing success story, location-based AR games all over the world. And I guess Niantic is now putting all the fund, all the revenue from that into building a worldwide platform that will enable other developers to build those kind of location-based experiences. So we can't wait to hear from Meghan more about that. Give it up for the head of go-to-market at Niantic platform, Meghan Hughes.
Thank you, Ori. So I've got a bunch of demos, so I'm going to try to go quickly. As Ori mentioned, Niantic is known for Pokemon Go, but just a reminder for folks who, or new information for folks who don't know, Niantic the team actually came from Keyhole, which was bought by Google, and then they worked on Google Earth and Google Maps, and that's where Pigo was born. John Hankey and team wanted to use the mapping and gaming to get kids off the couch and outside and moving. And that value that drove us to build Pigo is what drives us to build AR tech today and get people out exploring the world. Spun out in 2011, and Niantic in 2015 as its own. Became Niantic Labs in 2011 and spun out in 2015. And so part of our mission for our technology is very much location-based AR. It's to get people out, meeting in person, exercising, and socializing, so shared experiences. And I'll walk through the technology that's enabling all these different types of experiences that we're looking for. And we are also working with brands and partners to try to see how we can bring these core pillars to their apps and to their AR experiences. So as Ori mentioned, we have this large platform that powers all of our games. We are working on taking pieces of that. It's almost similar to the AWS story where you build something very robustly for the games that you need. And now we're trying to make it digestible to developers, sort of what Baron was discussing, how can we bring this technology and make it easy for developers to use? We also work with ARKit and AirCore, and we want to have our technology sit on top of that so that developers can get access to the tools and technology they need to build strong experiences. So that's where we are today. We're working on alpha for our developers, and we're moving over to beta in May. We're looking at 3 core pillars for our AR, sharing AR experiences, so back to socializing in real life, so multiplayer. Understanding, so our semantics awareness and categorization. Currently, Niantic is really good at outdoor semantics, so recognizing sky and building and ground, as you would imagine. And then mapping, similar to what Justin talked about with Google. Niantic's approach is taking mapping from the view of the players and having our players for Pigo and Ingress actively go out and scan locations that matter to them. So the monument question in Italy is what we would be looking for at Niantic. Having players scan the parks and local areas that matter to them, they add the information and the descriptions about it, and gathering this large 3D map around points of interest that matter to our player base. And we're also actively going out and scanning and mapping the world as well. So I'm going to go through a few demos of what was built recently. This one was built by Trigger. They made it within a few weeks. It's a multiplayer experience. So you can see this is this is something that we talk to a lot of brands about because it's actively engaging their viewers and their audience, that they can come together to build something in real life. And then, as you all know, probably on this call, especially if you're familiar with 6D, Niantic is also working very hard at making AR work realistically in the real world. So providing the ability to have occlusion through our meshing. This walkable plane one we'll show in a second. They all load at the same time, but here's just some really fun demos that I'm very excited about coming through the 6D acquisition as well last year. To see depth and meshing. This is actively in our developer platform right now, walkable plane. And then, as I mentioned, semantics. This has been really exciting because 6D, our mesh was 5 meters. So you'd get that AR realistic experience in front of you, but with the addition of the semantics from Niantic, and we can kind of place objects behind a building or behind the trees if it recognizes those trees and can occlude or interact with them. And then this is a tape from one of 6D's co-founders, Victor Oxford. This is in Niantic's platform right now for developers, but this is what you all might recognize as the mesh. And it's creating that realistic dynamic map and scan for a developer to access in order to create, interactive AR experiences in physics. So he just, you know, it mapped as he walked through this pathway, and now you're seeing what he walked through. And then similar to what Justin was talking about, Niantic also is working on a visual positioning system where we're using our player scans, the 3D scans of the locations that they provide to us through Pokemon Go and through Ingress and through future games, as well as going out and mapping locations so that we can create this 3D persistent experience for developers. And that persistence and localization for those on the call who are devs are all we hear about. I'm sure it's what Justin hears about as well, Baron. And so this is something that we're laser focused on building. And also similar to what Justin was saying about, you know, focusing on making this right. We're testing this out right now in our games. I mean, that's the fun thing about Niantic is we have these games that are already out there and globally accessible to people, and trying to bring this tech and really just like battle proof test this stuff with the games that we have now, with the games we have in development. And so that when we do bring it to developers, it's something that's rock solid, and also something that, you know, doesn't fringe on user privacy. This stuff's hard, and this is stuff that we take seriously, and we really want to make it work, and we want to make it right for users. And so we're focused on the, you know, the privacy aspect of this, but our goal is to get this to developers as soon as we can. And then this is just the last thing, and I'll move to questions. But as I mentioned, we are in alpha for our AR features. So as that platform that powers our game, we're slowly bringing as many features as possible to developers. So currently we have all the things that I just showed you, aside from the VPS, is available in alpha. So you should sign up before we announce beta next month and have more folks sign up. We also have a Black Developers Initiative where we're funding developers. It doesn't have to be a game. We're very much interested in seeing AR experiences in all different types of applications. So please do look at our Niantic.dev website and go to the BDI section and sign up if that if that fits your team. And then we're, you know, growing our platform. So we're hiring dev relations and dev community managers. So please also do reach out if this is somebody you know or somebody like yourself interested in.
Thank you, Megan. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you have questions for Megan, feel free to post in the chat. It was really interesting to see that, you know, we got 3 different perspectives. We got the Google approach, massively scanning the whole world with the Street View technologies, been doing it for many years and continue to do it. And they give sort of a robust solution. You have Niantic, which is actually using its players to scan the whole world and, you know, crowdsource the mapping. And then you have 18-year-old CEO of a startup that basically said, you know, show us your space, we'll map it for you, we'll do the solution for you. So kind of 3 different approaches, all great. You know, it's awesome. So let's see if there's any question. Sanjit is asking, I have some AR projects I'm doing for NASA and also for medical use. Can I publish them to Niantic store even though they aren't directly games related?
Yeah, so yes, and we are looking for non-game AR use cases. I'm actually leading a fund as well, working directly with clients and brands to try to hear what they want to build and see if we can help them get started. They're, you know, Baron mentioned this is a cold start problem, and AR is nascent, and so Niantic is fully invested in trying to help other experiences off the ground. To your point about publishing, Niantic is still, we do talk to other types of businesses around being published by us. So certainly check that out and apply to publishing. But right now, yeah, it has been mostly focused on games. But to be clear, we have 2 paths now. We have, you know, reach out to us and we might fund you or work with you to help you just get your AR app off the ground, or apply to be published by our game studio.
There's a really interesting UX question from George. When you design or build AR games, what's the sweet spot in terms of how much time users should spend in AR at every interaction?
It's a wonderful question. I mean, like we all know, it's 1 to 2 minute time span, like Baron was saying too, about holding up your phone. We actually want, and also going back to Niantic's point about getting people off the couch and outside and interacting, we want AR to be something that is quick and, you know, brings a meaningful experience to the application. It doesn't take away from it. And then you put it back in your pocket. And so we're looking at things like audio cues and other devices that cue you to let you know something's coming, that you should pull up your phone. And we're also using semantics to think about, because of this 1 to 2 minute window, to think about how do we flip the script on, you're walking around and you're just going to open this to search for a Pokemon, toward like, oh, you see a tree, and maybe there's something there because we know your application will recognize the tree, and you open your app because of where you are in the world. So that's stuff we're hoping to see change in behavior.
This is actually just something I think for everyone who's an AR developer, user safety needs to be top of mind. Like if you're building an AR app, which involves people staring at their phone and walking around, that can be potentially really dangerous for that person. So please, 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 like look at and think about glanceable AR experiences, especially if people are moving around. Because one of the things that's important is for AR as a whole is still a growing industry. Like we've talked about how it's nascent a number of times. And I think it's important for personally that every developer who's building AR experiences, like all it takes is one bad press story about AR to kind of be applied to a broad range of AR experiences. So please, like, think about user safety. Actually, in Google Maps and Live View, we intentionally actually gray out the screen if we detect that people have started moving too far, because we want people to be aware of the world around them. So just a continued plug for user safety on the front of AR.
Yeah, we've learned a lot from Pico. I'm actually thinking about making like an ebook on that. Maybe we should team up, Justin. Just the lessons learned, right? Like I think you even might have seen in the semantic video, it went by quickly, but we identify safe ground and unsafe ground because of the Pico experience. So it'll identify the street as an unsafe ground for walking. And so those are 100%.
All right, folks, this is all the time we have. We're over time a little bit, but I'm sure Meghan, Justin, and Baran, as well as Mike, would be happy to kind of get your questions in other ways. But before we go, let's do a big round of applause for our 4 speakers today: Mike Boland, Meghan Hughes, Justin Quimby, and Baran. Thank you guys for joining. You are all amazing and really pushing forward this amazing technology. So I want to thank you on behalf of the entire community. And with that said, everybody, thank you for joining. Would love to see you in the next meetup.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.